who done stepped in the game. So what you see before you is a little bit of a conversation between myself and the person that should be joining this conversation. They haven't really decided to reply to anything that I was doing. So what I'll do is I'll just give a back brief on what's going on here. And if they decide to join within the next 10 minutes, then great. If not, then yeah, that's fine. So a few weeks back, Mr. T put out a video regarding his opinions and his expectations going forward with regards to what Nintendo has shown of the Nintendo Switch. And as you can see in the little conversation in the comments, basically before, there was a lot of little negative comments that he was kind of throwing here and there, but I wasn't really paying attention to much of them until he started to say a few things here that were kind of off the cuff. So basically, he was already making assumptions about what Nintendo Switch would be, and I directly question that, as you can see here, because it would be kind of idiotic to make those kind of statements without any of that information. I mean, we still don't know anything about the Wii U at this point, so due to lack of interest was the excuse that the old Team Tweezers guys gave regarding their deep dive of the hardware and basically getting locked out and not being able to run arbitrary code. So I basically tried to give him the best case scenario here, just say, hey, was this an educated guess that you're giving? And I already know what the answer is at this point, but I try to give him the benefit of the doubt quite a bit. Just kind of letting them know exactly what was going on and how the parts came about, and basically exactly what's going on with the what are the potential things that could be going on with regards to the NVIDIA Tegra part or the NVIDIA Tegra architecture that's going to be used within the Nintendo Switch. Because as far as we know, it could just be some of the code and everything else is custom at this point. We all know how Nintendo works, so when they say, you know, something has some type of tech, it is usually nowhere remotely close to what they say it was based on. And just going back and forth here, he started talking about Emily Rogers, and I just had to laugh when I saw that there. So it's just a little bit of things going back and forth here and there. And somewhere further along this conversation, this little back and forth or whatever, there ended up being like somewhere in there, I don't know if I got muted or something in there happened where I wasn't able to see my posts on YouTube anymore. And I looked and I saw that I was basically either my comments were held for spam or I was blocked, basically, because I saw I saw an account based mute happen on this particular page here. And since he is the creator of the original comment, he does have all of the power to do that, since he's the original, he's the OP for that particular comment when I started replying. So at that point, you know, obviously I can just go into develop mode here and look at any of the code that's there or whatever, and be able to figure out exactly what happened and what people were still posting. So once I saw that he was still posting stuff, that's when I started looking and seeing some of the other comments he was making. So the conversation devolved into talking about PS4 for some reason, because he started talking about the NVIDIA Shield, and I was basically asking, why would you want an NVIDIA Shield over a Nintendo Switch or whatever? And well, basically he didn't want Wii U because he would rather have an NVIDIA Shield instead of that. And I'm like, the NVIDIA Shield is essentially a Wii U gamepad, because they're both tethered to whatever device they're going to be slinging from. And while the NVIDIA Shield tablet is a little bit independent, the main hook of it, the main crux of it, is the fact that it can stream high definition games from your PC, similar to the NVIDIA Shield console worked. So the main hook of it being like how the Nintendo Switch would be, is handicapped once you leave the house. And since, that's basically the same thing that happens with the Wii U, since you can't leave the console or whatever, whereas the Nintendo Switch you can take with you. So there was a little bit back and forth there. And then we end up going into whether he starts to say what he thinks the differences are or whatever. And somehow he just is unable to properly word what's going on here. He keeps saying that the Wii U gamepad needs a power source, and it doesn't. Obviously, it has a battery in there. People wouldn't complain about battery life if it needed a power source. So I was just kind of saying that kind of stuff, and then you start throwing names here and there and getting upset or whatever. The typical stuff that happens in a comment thread where people can't explain themselves the way that they should be able to, and words sometimes just don't come out the way that they need to. So therein we go back and forth for a little bit, and he starts talking about the PS4 because that's what he wanted to end up playing or whatever. And that's when I asked him, what exactly would you want the Nintendo Switch or the PS4 Pro for, specifically if all it would do was give you 4K and HDR? That's not necessarily a new experience. And why would you go out of your way just for that? And he mentioned he had just bought a 4K TV or something to that effect. And then I noticed that the 4K TV he was talking about when he brought up the model is a 43-inch 4K TV. And I'm like, is this sitting on your desk? Because otherwise, like, it doesn't matter what resolution it is. If you're sitting far away from this and it's on a couch pretty far away, 1080p looks just fine on that size of screen. So it doesn't really matter. But I didn't even really get into that. I didn't get a chance to, because that's when the whole back and forth and comments not being seen type of thing ended up happening. And I started quoting some of his stuff and started talking about how neither device will make use of the TV as they're upscaling instead of natively displaying. Then he went around and started talking about other things, like confirmed native 4K games on PS4 Pro, which may not truly be 4K. They may show some things in 4K, so we may end up seeing the pixels displayed being 4K, but the assets may not be 4K, which we know for the most part for a lot of the third-party games that are already out. And when you start talking about stuff about this brilliant upscaling technology called 4K checkerboard rendering, I had to start laughing about that too, because I know Mark Cerny and a couple other people within Sony's caused a little bit of a tizzy last week when they made all the Sony fans happy talking about this technique. And how they planned on using it for a PS4 Pro to give you close to native 4K resolution. But that's a little bit of a fallacy. And the reason why it's not a total truth is because the whole point of labeling something at a resolution is because it truly is that resolution for every full frame that's being displayed. If you're not showing everything for every full frame, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? You're back doing interlace shit again. Remember 1080i? Remember 480i? That's exactly what this is, only you're doing it inside of the device that's going to be sending the signal. And now you're going to be making the upscaler or your TV itself try to make all those frames progressive again, but it's not going to, because there's going to be holes where pixels should be in between each frame. So while the average person's eyes won't be able to discern these type of things, I'm pretty sure if Digital Foundry wasn't a bunch of fanboys, they'd be able to point it out in every single game. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the performance is going to be greater. It just means that you found a way to do less work. This is the same way that such high-performing games like Gears of War and stuff like that happened in the 7th generation, because they decided to use 60-bit color instead of using the full gamut of 32-bit color on some of these games. So since they use less color, that's less texels that are shown per frame, which means the texel bandwidth isn't that high, which means that they're able to get away with certain extra techniques or certain types of rendering, such as bump mapping and stuff like that, and normal mapping, without a high cost to memory. So this is essentially what they're doing, and it's nothing new. If anybody on the PC side has had a dual GPU setup at any point in time, this is essentially what it's doing, and it's doing it with both of the GPUs that the PS4 Pro is going to have. So it's basically doing asymmetric rendering. Each GPU is going to render a part of a frame or a part of the pixels at a given time. So all the pixel shaders on one GPU aren't being used up from one task or the other. And this way, both GPUs aren't screaming to hell and back because they can't display that frame buffer all in one go. So they just move pixels back and forth. And unbeknownst to both of those GPUs that individually cannot handle 4K, they are combining their power together to attempt to dither 4K and bring it together. Now, I had to laugh about it being called brilliant technology because it's been used as far back as during the 360 and all the way back to GameCube days, because it's always used for any popular platform that is fill rate limited. This is how they get that done. So there's Unreal documentation dealing with Unreal 3 and Unreal 4, even for the Xbox One, about how to get games to show up in eDRAM on both the Xbox 360 and on the Xbox One with regard to fitting inside of that frame buffer, since it's way smaller than the main memory is. So for Xbox One, I think one of the games was one of the Rainbow Six, I think it was Rainbow Six Siege. They had documentation there where they were talking about doing the exact same implementation of checkerboard rendering to make sure that they fit all of the 1 gig worth of stuff that they needed to do in each level that they were loading, and get all the render targets, which was anywhere between 30 to 200 megs, and all the different textures and whatnot are all loaded together. And whenever they did any of their pixel effects, they were all alternated each frame. And since they were alternated each frame, there wasn't a lot of bandwidth that was being needed at any point in time, or in the Xbox One's case, it would need anywhere up to 128 megs of eDRAM, which it doesn't have, to make those things happen. So they essentially chopped the screen up into multiple parts, anywhere between 4 to 16 different slices across the screen, and then they alternate. And when they alternate, one side of the screen is essentially invisible, but is counted for in the last frame. So each frame is being referenced in between each other, similar to what old school interlacing was. It was just more analog more than anything else. So all of the work that's being done to do all the post-processing effects and things of that nature don't require the large demanding bit of fill rate to make that happen. But it's not new. It's not exclusive to PS4. It's not exclusive to anything that Mark Cerny has come up with. It has been around for quite a bit. So essentially, this could happen on any platform, to include Nintendo Switch or even Wii U. It's a wonder that nobody came up with some of these extreme things to make things happen on that platform with the same amount of eDRAM as the Xbox One has ESRAM. ESRAM, I'm sorry. It's just odd to me because both of those consoles are very similar in a lot of ways, with the exception of the slow 8 gigs of RAM that thing has, but then it's capped anywhere between 3 to 4 gigs depending on the game. So it just to me it just seems like, hey, that 3 gig difference that you're talking about between the Wii U and the Xbox One when it comes to actually developing a game, there's some concessions to be had there. Games aren't exactly impossible to make happen on Nintendo's platform. They just didn't want to do it, and they knew the publishers weren't going to green light it. Number one, they weren't going to pay for it since the publishers weren't going to green light it. So there it is. But anyway, that was more of the discussion that I was going to want to try to have with Winter Horizon, but he doesn't seem to want to do anything other than talk on Twitter right now. I could see if he decided to do anything other than post there, but somehow I doubt it. Yeah, this is pretty much all he wanted to do, was go back and forth on this, and I don't really see anything more from him right now. So Just a lot of name calling here and there, and I just wanted him to go on the page. And for whatever reason, he has enough time to give me a 3-second reply from his phone or whatever device he's using here, but he can't click a link that he can obviously join on. So, just one of those things. So, yeah. And third, infernal thought processes abound. I'm really not understanding this. Any of you guys that are, watching, listening, or whatever, there are so many people out here that truly believe what they spread in the comment sections and among forums and stuff like that. Just stop for a little bit and actually think before you speak. And if you truly know something out there that other people don't, I mean, feel free to share. I am more than willing to have somebody, show me something new. So if we're talking about graphics implementations, if we're talking about architecture, we're talking about design, if we're talking about how different operating systems are able to make certain things happen, then feel free to bring that information. Don't just say, oh, it can't happen. And then when I ask you, well, why do you think that? I get nothing but crickets, or I get a litany of explanations that are nothing but links when you respond to me via text. But if I bring you on here, you don't even want to respond, show up, or say anything when you're here. To me, that's just one of those things. So this is going to be here. This entire discussion that we just had will be here. I'll keep it up. Just for those that want to look through the little thread or whatever, they saw everything that was there. You can actually go to, make sure you check out Mr. T. If you don't follow Mr. T, go there, subscribe, whatever, and check out that video. You can see the little conversation or whatever there, and you'll see a couple of other conversations that I had there as well, with a couple of links to some other pieces of information regarding both Nintendo Switch and other architecture and type of technology that's going around all together. Other than that, what I would like to do is turn my attention to you guys. So I imagine that I have some followers or some subscribers on YouTube, at least anyway, and a couple of people that frequently visit my page on Google+. So I'll be doing a bit more of these. They won't be in this format per se, but it'll be more of investigating, not necessarily the logic, but just why certain things aren't brought to light. Certain things like, why is it an issue to talk about why a game wasn't greenlit, or to talk about why a certain platform wasn't chosen to be developed on? And it is not necessarily just Nintendo. It could be talking about the Vita for all I care. It's just, what is your excuse, and why are this excuses left to the publisher instead of the people that actually made the decision? It shouldn't be the quote unquote creative director. The creative director wasn't the person that said no. The person that had the money was the person that said no. So where is that person's explanation, either in writing or verbally? And we need more behind the scenes of some of this stuff. I think that there's a couple of talks that IGN did that were a couple of post-mortems from a couple of developers that they put out maybe a couple of weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago. And a couple of those developers that they talked to were really candid and let a lot of stuff out of the bag that normally wouldn't be talked about. That's the kind of stuff that I feel, I won't say should be exposed, but should be a little bit more informational than they are these days. It seems like the holders of all the information are the people that work on these games, and like right now there are games that exist right now that don't exist. And the reason why I say that is things like StarCraft Ghosts, the original version of Duke Nukem Forever. There are games out there that have been worked on all this time, and nobody has let them publish it. And it sat out to God knows where. It's sitting in some studio somewhere that's been turned into a furniture store. And maybe the owner of the furniture store one day will go in the back room, pull off a panel off a wall, and see all kind of data discs in the back with all kind of backups of artwork and all the other kind of things that have just been left there. So those are the types of things that I feel that I don't want to say they should be forced to do these type of things, but I feel that they shouldn't feel pressured by the publisher or anything like that to give that kind of information out. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. I understand if Nintendo has you under an NDA or something like that, but Microsoft and Sony usually don't. They're pretty lax when it comes to the developer talking about technical things, and they usually give big spreadsheets and charts about stuff like that. But it just seems like when it comes to developers that are under certain major publishers, they're still more tight-lipped than say an indie developer is with regard to how they made things work or what kind of problems they ran into and how do they solve them and how do they get around it. Because the whole point of making anything for a game console is working around limitations, not pretending they don't exist for the purpose of feeding your hype wagon. We all know that there are limited consoles. They're dead the moment they come out the door with regards to forward progression, for lack of a better word. We all know that they're pretty much limited. So, but the advantage therein is knowing that they're limited, knowing the things that are there that are fixed, that aren't going to change, and therefore your expectations aren't going to change, and therefore the tools and everything else isn't going to change, and that is the advantage that you have for that platform. I think a lot of people have gotten lost to that, and I hope that sometime in the future, somebody really smart is going to get back to it before things get really, really bad. This is Shadow Files Infinite. Do you play games to have fun or to impress other people? I'm out.